All right, welcome back to another one of my case studies. In this one, this is going to be a little bit different than the ones I've done before in the sense of the ones I've done before have been with clients that I've been working with for a longer period of time. Probably, I think every single case study I've done so far has been with someone I've been working with for at least a year, honestly. But yeah, this one is going to be about one of my clients, Abby, who I've actually only been working with for 3 months. I believe it's been 13 weeks. And the reason I'm highlighting it is because the amount of progress we've made has been substantial, and it's been a result of very, very intentional changes to both technique and programming. And I'm going to highlight both of those in this video. So the way I'm going to go about this is I'm going to start by highlighting some initial considerations I've made with her demographic, with life outside of the gym, with her leverages, and just a small recap of lifter profile for her essentially. And then I'm going to go about her squat and bench technique and the issues that arose before we made any changes, and then her squat and bench technique after we made changes to those issues. And then I'm going to do the same thing with her programming. I'm going to very, very lightly touch upon the programming she was doing before. I'm not really going to show that with a screen share or anything, because that's the property of her old coach, and I'm not going to, showcase that for other people. I'm just going to lightly touch upon it, and then I'm going to, in more detail, touch upon the changes we've made to her programming that has allowed specifically her squat and bench to shine. So first, to explain some initial considerations that I made about Abby and just general data that I gathered off the bat that influenced decisions in programming and just how I approached Abby's first training block, was she has been lifting for a long period of time. She's been training for 5+ years just in the gym doing her own thing, and powerlifting for at least 2 years. I think it was 2 to 3 years off the top of my head, at least 2 years. And to tie into that, she wasn't enjoying training a whole lot at the moment. She actually took a decently good chunk of time off of training recently, right before she applied. Multiple months off of program training and just kind of doing her own thing, getting in the gym willy-nilly without structure. And someone who's been training and lifting weights for her, like her, for 5 years and powerlifting for 2+ years, you're gonna encounter times and periods of training where you don't enjoy things. You're not gonna be happy with the current state of how things are going at some point over multiple years of training. You can't have this consistently enjoyable linear progress that is going to yield positive results 100% of the time. It's unrealistic, and it just frankly is not going to happen. So with her training age and the mental state and mental relationship to lifting that she currently had, I knew that frankly just getting a system of programming for her that yielded positive results and yielded progress was going to probably help that enjoyment out in the gym. Before we get into the programming side of things, she is also a 67.5 kilo female. She competes in the 67.5 kilo weight class. She hasn't competed in a year now, so we're not really too concerned about the weight class, but that is just the weight class she's competed in historically, so that's roughly around what her body weight range is at. As far as leverages go, she isn't super well leveraged for deadlift, and typically those who aren't well leveraged for deadlift are well leveraged for bench, and that is definitely the case for her. She is easily the best leveraged for bench out of all three lifts. She has a little bit of longer femurs, and she's got to fight to hit depth a little more on squat. Doesn't really have to fold over that much. She doesn't have a very, very short torso. But if I were to rank how well leveraged she was for each lift, from best leveraged to worst leveraged, it would easily be bench, squat, and then deadlift. Deadlift is she's not entirely disadvantaged, but the movement pattern that she has got herself into that has yielded best results is something that's very squatty, and is a movement pattern that has forced a lot of extension, where she's almost starting a deadlift like an Olympic lift, if that makes sense. Bench, she knew how to bench before me. She had a great looking bench. There were some fairly significant technique adjustments that I did make off the bat. I'll get to that after this. And then for squat, she was a good squatter, but during the time, she had a significant hip shift, which impacted force production wildly out of the hole, like to the point where she was nearly falling over on 70-75% of her 1 rep max, maybe a little more than that. But um, there were definitely things I wanted to fix technically on all 3 lifts, and that was not only a technique thing, but it was related to her relationship with training, like I mentioned before. She was not in a good emotional state. She wasn't enjoying training. She wasn't really getting excited to lift. And again, I knew that if I were to program something for her that yielded progress and yielded something sustainable over time, that again put weight on the bar in a controlled manner, she would probably be enjoying training a hell of a lot more. So when I say that the technique is almost related to her emotional state with training, what I mean by that is she would get in the gym, have a session where technique felt off, and then that would kind of create this snowball effect where she would have this is before she inquired to me. She would have a session of squats where she was shifting all over the place and trying to correct that and create this artificial movement pattern, which frankly just made her shifting worse. And that would make her not excited to squat. And then because she's not excited to squat, she just wouldn't be excited to get into the gym. So that was easily one of my biggest considerations to make initially with her technique on squat. Again, like I said, there was a few things I wanted to do on bench. I'll probably cover that first. And there was a couple things I wanted to do on deadlift, which actually didn't really work out in the end. So I'm going to cover technique on all 3 lifts, kind of show some videos of her lifting and point out the areas that I wanted to improve upon immediately and what I did to improve upon those areas and how they're working now. So now I'm going to go over pretty much the before and after of technique. I'm going to start with bench. I'm going to show the after of bench, and then I'll go to squat and deadlift. There's more to say on bench, and frankly, the programming side of things is kind of how we resolved squat. We didn't really do much cueing or telling her to do much verbally. So to start with bench, I'm going to show 3 different videos which show different components that I wanted to work on. I am going to start with the middle one, which was her 3rd attempt in current all-time max, like 1 rep max at the time with 160 pounds. I think she actually failed this weight during that prep, which just shows that, it shows how strong she was at the time. She was really only capable of benching 160 pounds at the time. And that was like a true max. So whether this might look like an easy rep, but it seems like with her, she'll kind of hit this point where it's either, she'll get it up and it looks pretty easy, and then you go up 2 pounds and she can't get it. But to start with her, first thing I want to look at is what she's doing with her legs. And it's kind of hard to see because the text on the bottom is in the way, but I want you to take a look at what she's doing with her feet, where she'll unrack here and then she will twist outwards and almost try to create this sense of torque, or this sense of lateral stability, which I think is good on bench, but she's essentially just taking her feet and her legs and driving them the wrong way. She's trying to create almost just a base of support instead of horizontal force being directed towards her face. So that's the first thing I was looking at, is what she's doing with her legs, where she's literally just straddling the bench and trying to create force, or well, not even force, but just stability without the horizontal force. That was the first thing. Another thing I took a look at was what she's doing right at the beginning of this video, where she is creating this arch without even holding onto the bar. And she's going to do the same thing in this video on the right, if I can find it. But she'll press back with her legs, and then she just completely lets go of the bar. She is not even tensioning herself against the bar. If this bench wasn't sticky, when she lets go of the bar, she would probably just deflate and lose her arch and her leg drive all together. But the big thing is, how is she even creating this arch without using the bar to create the arch? You need some kind of weight on the bar to anchor yourself into position. That bar is going to be actively pushing you against the bench to create this flat upper back and neck. And what she's doing here is she's pretty much just extending to create her arch. She's kind of using the bar to her advantage here by swinging on it, and then she's obviously extremely mobile, and she's able to create this degree of extension and creating this big arch. But she's doing so with her legs a little bit here, right? Obviously she's pressing upwards, right? But it's not upwards and back into the bar. That bar should be dictating more of what that setup looks like. So you can see here, just completely letting go of all that tension, and then she'll re-grab the bar, and then from there, she'll kind of now unrack the bar. And she does the exact same thing in this middle video. You can even see her hands are already off the bar here. And then she'll finally grab the bar, and then she'll unrack. So two things: her foot position and what she's doing with her legs is too much outwards. She's just creating force in the wrong direction and misunderstanding what the legs are doing in the first place. And the second thing is she's letting go of the contact point that dictates her entire setup, which is the bar. Finally, you can already see what I wanted to get rid of in this leftmost video, which is she's just dictating her setup around where that rack is. She's pretty much grabbing the rack to kind of center herself on the bench, all while pressing back with her legs. I don't think she was putting her feet up on the bench. I don't think so. It was more of a rack issue to start, but what we're doing here is we're just creating a contact point that is not part of her setup after unrack. We need to be grabbing the 3 contact points, which are the bar, again, what I just said about her letting go of that contact point. So her hands on the bar where her grip width already should be, her upper back on the bench, and then her feet on the floor, where her feet already should be after unrack. I'm a big fan of just starting your feet where they are going to be after you unrack. Just keep your feet there. So that's the third thing I wanted to really get rid of. You can see here, same thing as just letting go of the bar. This is exactly what she's doing. She's creating this setup, but she's missing the third contact point, which is the bar. We need to be using that to our advantage in order to dictate an efficient setup. All right, and this middle video now is more of the after video, where after just 3 blocks, we've put, 10 kilos on her bench, 22 pounds. She's gone from 159 pounds, like 160, I think it was, to 181, 182, in 3 blocks of fixing everything technically that I just mentioned and improving her programming substantially. So what I'm going to point out here is already she's grabbing the bar without wiggling against the rack. She is not creating this external torque or just too much lateral stability while lacking the horizontal force. And those are 2 things I want you to look at. I also want you to take a look at what shoes she's wearing. She didn't need to be wearing heels on bench. I'm typically not a big fan of wearing heels on bench. If it just simply works better for someone, then it works better for someone. But for her, that was actually one of the first things I told her to do. Get rid of the heels and wear flats. You're going to be able to not only create a higher arch that way for her individually, but also just understand what those legs are going to be doing, which is creating force horizontally. And you don't really need heels to do that. I think it's going to be better for her. So this is her current max. This was literally a little over a week ago to end the 3rd block together with 181. And you can see she just grabs the bar, pushes back with her legs. She walks back a tiny bit. That's something we're still trying to get rid of, but it's not really causing anything bad. But besides that, she is just pushing back, sliding right into position, and then unracking. And that's it. She's not letting go of the bar. And then you can see as she sets her butt down, just constant leg drive that entire time. She's not creating this external force. She's not overly stabilizing by twisting outwards or pointing her toes out or just driving her knees out. It was almost like she was trying to sumo deadlift her leg drive. But you can see how much better it looks here. She's just creating this position dictated entirely from the horizontal force being delivered from her legs. And then she unracks. Like I said, very slowly sets her butt down, and you can see her arch looks a lot better here. Her leg drive is significantly better, and you can see this is her current 1 rep max, and I don't even know what she has in the tank. She probably had 2.5 kilos in the tank on this day. Frankly, I think she's going to be pressing 190 this block. All right, so for squat, this is another one that we took a pretty substantial technical intervention on, and at first, I was telling her this a lot, but at first it was a big guess because she had a hip shifting issue. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, when someone asks if they need to improve their shifting in the hole, It's just going to come down to force production and if it is actually causing any issue in the first place, because most people aren't going to be perfectly symmetrical in the hole. Abby just happened to be one of the people who uh, she had such an enormous hip shift out of the hole, especially that it would just impact force production. And not only that, but she would just start creating this artificial movement pattern to try and mitigate that shift and just create this very artificially symmetrical position in the hole. So when she would come out of the hole, it would just kind of bias right back into where her body wants to go. So the leftmost video is a video to just show when her shifting was very, very bad. And then this video here is more so just showing, I might even find a little bit of a better example here, but this video is kind of showing one of the first squats she sent me during our first week together, and then I got a couple after videos to show. But this first one on the left, you can see as she's coming into the hole, and this one is more of a result of her trying to create that artificial pattern. You can see when she comes in the hole, she looks okay. There's a little bit of lack of depth on the left side, which is what I addressed. There's a little bit of lack of left side shoulder mobility, and in turn, she's kind of compensating by dumping into that right side and then shifting right into that right side because she needs to counterbalance because of all the weight being put on that left side. So you can kind of see there's a difference in oblique depression. There's a difference in shoulder mobility. Not super prominent here until she gets in the hole, but you can see right out of the hole, she's just shifting and quite literally almost losing balance. Again, this one is... this specific video is more so a result of her getting in her head and trying to create that artificial movement pattern. So the first thing I wanted to address with her is how we can take an educated guess and a good stab at how to fix the shifting and at least mitigate it. It's probably not ever going to look perfectly symmetrical for her, but if we can just make it look better in general, that was the goal at hand. First thing I told her to do was be careful of what her shoulder's doing, and this is why I have this middle video, because you can see a pretty noticeable difference in just external rotation on each shoulder. We've got a little bit of a bar tilt here. I'm not too worried about that. Again, you can see that happening on the left side too because of the shoulder mobility. And what's happening here is she can't really keep that left elbow under her as much, where she's hiking that left elbow up and that right elbow can stay down as a result of just the lack of external rotation on that left side. So you can see that's what the difference in her upper body was. It's also creating a little bit of a twist in her obliques, and as a result, she needs to counterbalance on her right side. She has trouble hitting depth on her left side, so again, could use a little bit more just improvement, internal rotation on her left side. But it all, in my opinion, came down to what was going on in the upper body, and I kept telling her this, like I said, but it was more so an educated guess to start off. So what I did was I gave her a couple shoulder external rotation drills to do on that left side, and I gave her one hip internal rotation drill to do on her left side as well to improve depth on that side, make it easier for her to counterbalance into both feet, because like I said, she was kind of shifting into that right side because she was already so biased onto the left side until she got in the hole, and then she needed to counterbalance, shift to the right, and then she'd shift out of the hole to the right as well. So I gave her drills on her left shoulder, drills on her left hip, and it looked substantially better. Safe to say I made the right guess. This video right here is shortly after we did a bunch of work on those, and you can see her left shoulder is pretty damn symmetrical with her right. You can even see it's actually a little more under her right side now. And not only that, but you can see coming out of the hole, there is pretty much no shifting. Like, this is what her squat's looking like today. I'll play the heavier set on the right, but there's really no shifting. That's a result of force production. Like, force production is not really being impacted here. It's pretty rare to find something that looks perfectly symmetrical and just perfect in general, but you can even see, like, throughout the set is when that left elbow and that left shoulder would become an issue and show problems. But now, after doing, 2 or 3 reps that was, the left elbow is still under the bar. So we took the right guess as what the issue was on the left side of her upper body, and now she's having an easier time not counterbalancing into the right because she's having a hard time hitting depth and internally rotating on the left hip. So I'm very happy with the result there. I'll play the rightmost video to but this is a double that she hit last block. Again, third block together. But this is 2.5 kilos under her meet PR, and you can see left elbow looks great, pretty symmetrical in the upper body, coming down, and there's very, very little shifting happening. Again, this is a high percentage of her 1 max, so for it to look this clean is pretty goddamn impressive. And there you go, 2.5 kilos under the meet PR for 2. No shifting that I consider to be an issue anymore. So that was the big intervention that we took on squat technique. And frankly, it only took, I think, 2 to 3 weeks for that issue to be resolved just by doing some drills on the left shoulder and on the left hip. And then last thing real quick, I'm going to touch on deadlift technique and just initial considerations with that. I'm not going to touch too much on the after for this one because frankly, what we tried to do off the bat to resolve technique just didn't really work and wasn't really clicking as quickly as we needed it to. Just for context, she's competing in the first week. She's competing on the first week of January. And I think we started in July. And frankly, just the technique changes we tried to make on deadlift weren't, like I said, weren't clicking as quickly as we needed it to for her to kind of get back to her top end strength. But I will talk about the issues that I thought she had off the bat, which was that she was just being too squatty. You can see, especially on the way down, she's pretty much just squatting the weight down. I don't know why it froze on me. Let me try to replay it. You can see on the way down, we're really just squatting the weight down and setting her hips too low. And then as she pulls, those hips are finally coming up to that proper hip height. And what we tried to do was initially we did a lot of eccentric RDLs to conventional deadlifts. We did just tempo stuff in general, full resets to work on that first rep positioning because her second rep she would especially get into the squatty tendency. And then a second thing that I pinpointed for her was that she's really trying to keep those scaps pinned and keep that upper body a bit too rigid. You can kind of see what she does here, this big pinching motion with her shoulders and her scaps. And it's looking a lot better today. Like I think that habit's been broken, so there has been some technical progress, and that was a pretty easy fix to be honest. But in short, we tried to get her deadlift a little more hingy and a little less squatty, and it didn't really work out. It never really clicked for her. It didn't really feel very comfortable. And at the 12-week out mark, which is, I think it was a couple weeks ago, or something like that, like, yeah, around a couple weeks ago, I just made a decision to pretty much scratch what we were trying to create with her technique and go back to what felt more natural in the past. And what felt more natural in the past was this squatty tendency that she gets in. So we're going to roll with that for now, but I did want to add that to the mix because I think that's important in terms of just the general considerations. So the area that I wanted to emphasize the most was establishing a system of programming to coexist with not only the technique changes that I wanted to make on all 3 lifts, and also have something that was enjoyable for her. If you remember what I said at the beginning of this, the enjoyment and excitement factor for her was a big issue, and she didn't really have that spark that she had prior, and those were the 2 big priorities. So to start with technique, for starters, you can't really have one or the other when writing a first training block while also trying to nitpick technique. For example, what I mean by that is if you're trying to make technique changes, you need to have a program to supplement those. And same thing with the opposite, right? If you can write someone a really good program, but if it doesn't allow technique to thrive or flourish or to actually create an environment where technique changes can be made, or the necessary variation work or the right proper rep ranges are not there, then you can't have the both at the same time. So that was what I wanted to prioritize, right? Having a system of programming to let the technique changes flourish, but also have something that was spread out enough in comparison to what she was doing before, especially on bench, for her to enjoy her training and have enough time in between sessions for her to prioritize external life as well. Okay, so I'm going to run through the first training block that I wrote her, and I'm going to go through, in a little shorter, the current training block that she's running right now. Again, like I mentioned before, they're very similar because I had a really good feeling of what to do off the bat, and it worked pretty much immediately. And when something's working, there's really not much to change from there. So that's why things are looking very similar. And frankly, every single block, she's adding pounds to all 3 lifts. So what I want to point out first was, if I can scroll, Abby is very busy on Mondays and Fridays. So when I was writing her first training block, I already knew off the bat Mondays and Fridays were going to be an easy way for her to enjoy training more if she just wasn't training on both of those days. She runs her own business, and both of those days are her busy days. I said, all right, well, before I even assign a day or assign a certain lift on a certain day of the week, I'm just going to mark both of those off as your rest days because I think that made the most sense. So that was what I did very first, is just cross off Monday and Friday. From there, like I said before, she was benching. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but she was benching 3 days a week, and before, 2 of those days were consecutive. So that was a big low-hanging fruit that I wanted to just split up. I was tempted to either just keep her at 3 days a week, and then just spread them out so she wasn't benching 2 days in a row. But I actually just added a fourth day, and it was a super easy fourth day. So what she's doing now is she's got 4 days a week bench, so +1 frequency, and everything is spread out a lot better to pretty much more evenly distribute workload throughout the week. This is good because A, her leverages can handle a lot of benching, but B, if I ever have a 3 time a week bencher, I'm going to do everything possible to not have them benching 2 days in a row, because I think that doesn't really make sense unless there's some kind of life circumstance getting in the way where you can't train 2 or 3 days in a row or something like that, or whatever it may be. There's scenarios that warrant different things that happen, obviously, but if I can, I'm going to do everything in my power to spread out those bench days as best as possible. So yeah, overall, what I did was I put 4 times a week bench, added that fourth day, and then more evenly distributed those days. So she's only benching twice in a row 1 time, and the other 2 days are pretty evenly spread out. For squat, actually, what I'm going to do first is go over bench programming. But her first bench session was on Sunday, and what that was literally just a 3x2 tempo at a percent. So I just wrote the number out for her, and that was her fourth bench day. Just a really smooth and easy introduction to a fourth frequency. So I did that off the bat. That was something I wanted to point out. Just add a very light fourth bench day. Her primary bench was a single, a triple, and then she had sixes after that. This is the day that we wanted to be performance determining, right? We wanted that day to shine. That was where we wanted her heaviest bench exposure to be. Her first single of the first block was with 132. She could probably take that for, I don't know, 8 to 10 reps now. But her primary day was on Tuesday, and then we had her tertiary day on Thursday. That was just ascending Larson 8s at the time. And on Saturday was her secondary bench that I got her doing just a 1x5 and then a 3x5. Okay, so again, the numbers and the stimulus per day, the number one thing I considered was just a more even distribution of volume and frequency. For squat, she has a pretty standard primary day. It's just a triple and back down fives to start out, right? We're going to push that triple as much as we can. Those back down fives are more so just your back off sets to fulfill the immediate volume needs that she's going to need throughout the week. More so, the biggest consideration I made was how to, like I said before, how to supplement the program, supplement the technique changes with the program. And as I mentioned, the biggest issue technically on her squat was just the hip shift. How can we make a program to supplement improving a hip shift besides just cueing it and explaining why that hip shift is happening to her? My strategy off the bat was ascending pause squats into a comp set. So what these would do was pretty much force her to be more even in the hole and have more even foot pressure, because what she was doing before is, as I said, she would kind of start with one elbow up high, right, lacking that rotation in the shoulder, pretty much twisting to one side, and then she'd be so biased into one side on the hole, and then as she would start squatting out of the hole, she'd shift into that opposite side. So pause squats are just a nice and easy way to actually get the lifter to just have better center of mass management in the hole, but also just keep that foot pressure even, so she can actually feel when that differentiates and feel when she's shifting to that one side in the hole. and then doing the competition squat set after that is pretty much, hey, let's take the adaptations from these pause squats and practice it on a competition squat set, so she's not too overly reliant on the pause, because I didn't want the pause squats to be the only good sets of squats she had per week. I wanted her to be able to practice that on some kind of competition squatting. And then finally on deadlifts, again, I'm not going to run through that too much here, because what we ended up doing didn't really work off very well off the bat, but the goal here was to get her hinging better. So I gave her some RDLs, and that was her secondary day. She was doing a lot of just competition deadlift straight sets before, and I wanted her to have more of a performance determining set and just less volume overall. So I actually took some of the volume she was doing prior and put it into an RDL to have her hinging better. And then we just had a pretty decently standard competition deadlift primary day here, just 2 harder triples and then a large percentage drop off to a 2x4. So now this is the beginning of our 4th block together. A couple things I want to point out is we relocated her primary bench day. We actually just took her entire primary bench microcycle and bumped it back 2 days because I wanted her primary bench to be on Saturday. It was pretty apparent that first block together, she was strongest on that primary bench, right, which was on Tuesday before. She was also pretty strong on Saturday. She did bench after she squatted on Saturday, but I pretty much wanted that primary bench to be on Saturday after that first block together. Again, what I did before was I tried not to deviate from the days she was benching too much, other than spreading them out a lot better. But after that first block, I just took the entire bench microcycle and shifted it back 2 days. So you can kind of see she was benching on Tuesday before, and now she's benching on Saturday. So her Thursday was bumped to Sunday, or Sunday was bumped to Thursday. So everything was pretty much just pushed back 2 days. So she was doing her tempo work. Now she's doing her tempo work still 2 days before her primary day. It's just on different days of the week. And things look a little bit different now. Sorry, I inverted my scroll, so it's a little confusing. But on her, where are we? On her Sunday session, she has her ascending Larson 8s. It's the exact same thing. We're kind of switching from 9s to 8s each block. And then coming down to Tuesday, she has a single, which is starting at RP 7 to 7.5 on her secondary day during her week 1, and then she's got 5 sets of 4 after that with a percentage drop for the final 4x4 there. Coming into Thursday, she's got tempo. Initially, as you saw in the first block, it was just a 3x2 tempo at 60%. I think it was 60%, so extremely easy day, and we found that was just almost too manageable for her, and we started slowly ticking that percentage up over time. So now she has just a top tempo double, a small percentage drop to the other 2 tempo doubles, and then after that we added more workload because she was able to handle it, quite literally 0 fatigue on every single day, and we just added a 2x7 at 70% after that, just to kind of get her benching a little bit more before her primary day, because what happened was we found that when we shifted both bench days back 2 days, shifted all of her bench days back 2 days. She was a little bit stronger on that Tuesday for a couple weeks, and I said, okay, well, let's get you primed a little more for Saturday and doing a couple sets on Thursday prior to that Saturday session. And then coming into her primary bench, you can see it's the exact same thing we did when we started, just a single, a triple, and back down 6s, and it's going so well. I frankly have no plans to change that. As I showed earlier, she has added 10 kilos to her bench, and her current PR was easy. Like, she could probably bench 190 right now, and if that's the case, that's 31 pounds on her bench just from 3 blocks. And you can see here she's still squatting on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Her secondary squat is still ascending pause squats up to a comp top set. Just the rep ranges are a tiny bit different throughout each block. And then coming into her primary squat day, right now she's down to a single. We ran triples for a couple blocks, did doubles, and now she's on to her single. That video of her squatting 270 for 2 from like less than 2 weeks ago was when we were running that block of doubles. And then she has back down 4s here. So pretty much a similar primary day and a similar secondary day, because it's both working out quite well. And the small changes we made to deadlift were we actually switched her RDL day for just competition deadlift, A, because I think she needed a little bit more workload throughout the week, and B, we kind of threw away, like I said, the more hingy technical changes that we initially started with, and I didn't really think the RDLs were necessary. I kind of prefer she gets more practice pulling off the floor during this stage in prep. And then her primary day right now is the same, a similar format where she's got 2 lower rep sets. The second one is going to be with full resets. That's how we're practicing that first rep. And then an extra set here just at lower reps. So similar volume compared to that first block. It's just going to be lower rep per set count. So that pretty much wraps things up. Again, the priority here overall was getting her to run a program that was more enjoyable and sustainable for her everyday life. For example, that Monday and Friday for her, I just immediately knocked off as rest days for her. And as I also said in the beginning, just doing something that I was pretty confident that would yield progress off the bat. I actually told her this on our onboarding call, but I was very confident in how much she would progress immediately, just because of the lowest hanging fruits that we could pick in terms of fixing programming and technique for her. So enjoyment and overall just getting something that was sustainable. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with things. And again, most of the results on bench just came from spreading workload out throughout the week and fixing those things with technique. And we've added 10 kilos or 22 pounds to her bench, and it looks like she has another 5 kilos in the tank, which she'll probably hit in the next block or two. If we can just keep chipping this PR each block, that would be fantastic. So that's kind of where things came from bench, and such a substantial improvement in only 3 blocks. And then for squat, similarly but different, the results have come from just allowing that secondary day to let the technique changes with her hip shift flourish. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you next time.